Good evening. Welcome to Novara Live. Coming up tonight, the Trump administration clashes with the Second Amendment and loses. And Matt Goodwin has been announced as Reform's candidate in an upcoming Manchester by-election. TikTok users are reporting that anti-Trump content is being suppressed, and a certain right-wing conspiracy theory is back. I'm Aaron Bastani, and tonight I'm joined by Kieran and Andrieu. Kieran, how are we?
Always delighted to be here on a Tuesday with you, Aaron. And given that the Labour Party described Andy Burnham as former France international and Manchester United player Paul Pogba, I wanted to know from you, Aaron, if you could be any French footballer, who would you be?
Oh, so many big characters. Nicolas Anelka.
That's why it's such a great question.
Robert Pires, but it has to be Le Roi. I'm a Republican, but King Eric Cantona. You know, if you drop kick a thug for mouthing off about your family, I think you're a bit of a legend. What about you?
Actually, not entirely dissimilar. Zinedine Zidane, who headbutted Marco Materazzi in the chest for allegedly being racist and certainly bad-mouthing his sister.
Who knew?
Not condoning violence necessarily.
Who knew French footballers could be so violent? If you'd like to support our work here at Novara Media, you can sign up at novaramedia.com/support. We don't just talk about football, believe it or not. As ever, don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments. Use a super chat. Sometimes we read the other ones too. Before we go on to our first story, we also want to talk about an event we have coming up. Very, very big event. Join us for the first Downstream IRL of the year. Everyone is talking about it. And I'll be talking to Ash Sarkar for the paperback launch of her book, Minority Rule. That's on the 16th of February at the Earth Theatre in Hackney. Lovely part of the world, Dalston Junction, Dalston, Kingsland. All around there, nice cafes, nice restaurants, nice pubs. Ash is always great company. I can't think of a more appealing night, frankly, as the nights begin to get a little bit shorter. There's a little bit more sunlight and hopefully a sunny conversation at hand as well. Although, of course, we're talking about the right and how it keeps on winning. Maybe we'll have some positive proposals going forward as well. As I've said, the tickets are available to that. If you want to get one, click the link in the description below.
I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign. This is a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons.
You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law.
Don't let the left kid you with this, that this is just a normal protest where people are peacefully protesting. No, it's not. Peaceful protesters don't have 9mm weapons with 2 extra magazines.
That was Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, FBI boss Kash Patel, and Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew, all commenting in the hours and days following the execution of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Pretty on the streets of Minneapolis on Saturday. But what they're also doing there is showing that a serious chunk of US President Donald Trump's administration are complete idiots. Why? Because, as we reported on this show yesterday, each of those statements is a direct contravention of the Second Amendment to the US Constitution. That's, of course, the one that gives American citizens the right to bear arms. Now, Pretty was carrying a gun he was legally allowed to own and legally allowed to carry concealed in his waistband. And there is nothing that will trigger Republicans more than the federal government telling US citizens where or when they can carry guns. Never mind protecting federal agents who kill a US citizen, then use the fact that he was exercising a key constitutional right as a justification, all while labeling him, quote, a domestic terrorist. That is, in the context of American politics, kicking the biggest hornet's nest around. And as a result, a lot of Trump's allies have been very badly stung. This was one comment given to Politico by the US's biggest gun lobby group, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, in regard to Patel's comments. The FBI director needs to brush off that thing called the Constitution because he clearly hasn't read it. I know of no more crucial place to carry a firearm for self-defense than a protest. Direct contravention, not just of what Kash Patel said, but those 3 clips we played right at the start, including that congressman. He's saying, the last place you should be bringing a gun is to a protest. Those aren't real protesters. Well, the NRA kind of disagrees. And they're a really important organization in the context of American public life, but also in terms of the Republican Party ever doing well. California Governor Gavin Newsom made this jibe online. The Trump administration does not believe in the Second Amendment. Good to know. He's nailed them. Last night, White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt answered questions about some of the administration's comments linking the slaying of Alex Pretty to his gun ownership.
FBI Director Kash Patel said in a Sunday interview, quote, "You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest." Does the president believe the Second Amendment rights remain in effect even when protesting?
The president supports the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding American citizens. Absolutely. There has been no greater supporter or defender of the right to bear arms than President Donald J. Trump. So while Americans have a constitutional right to bear arms, Americans do not have a constitutional right to impede lawful immigration enforcement operations. And any gun owner knows that when you are carrying a weapon, when you are bearing arms and you are confronted by law enforcement, you are raising the assumption of risk and the risk of force being used against you. And again, that's unfortunately what took place on Saturday.
Just say it. Just say it. We believe in the right to bear arms as long as you don't disagree with us. You can conceal and carry as long as you're not left wing. I don't think it works like that. I don't think a constitutional right can't just apply to people who agree with you. But you know what? I'm not being flippant here. That's genuinely how these people work. That is genuinely how these people see the world. And it's genuinely why they are the biggest threat to liberal democracy in the United States. That was some very careful wording from Leavitt there. She was also asked about Kristi Noem.
To follow on Gabe's question, Secretary Noem said Alex Pretty committed an act of domestic terrorism. Stephen Miller labeled Pretty a domestic terrorist. Does the president agree with them?
Look, as I've said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Pretty in that way. However, I have heard the president say he wants to let the facts in the investigation lead itself.
Was he alarmed to hear his top officials referring to him in that way, rushing to that judgment?
Danny, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. On Stephen Miller's comments,
Now, that was a very clear signal that Trump no longer has Noem's back. Another bad omen for Noem is the 2-hour-long meeting that Trump hauled her into the White House for. That was to discuss her handling of Alex Pretty's murder. Border Control Commander Gregory Bovino, who defended the killing of Pretty, has also been politically damaged. Bovino has been an aggressive ally of Trump's, overseeing violent ICE raids across the US and seemingly taking great pleasure from brutal confrontations between his agents and the various communities protesting against them. But now, he's out. The White House has removed him from Minneapolis, replacing him with Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. Bovino has also allegedly been stripped of his title, Commander at Large. The comments from Trump's allies suggest that Republicans seem pretty unhappy about the idea that Americans on the left might also have a right to own guns. They didn't mind when Kyle Rittenhouse carried an armed semi-automatic weapon into a protest, killing 2 people and injuring a 3rd. Republicans treated his prosecution as a kind of martyrdom to Second Amendment rights. He was, of course, acquitted and then invited to meet Donald Trump, who was president at the time, and it was his first term. He nabbed interviews with Tucker Carlson and even took part in several Turning Point USA events. And many right-wingers have for years argued against any inroads against the Second Amendment. Here's Alex Jones speaking to Piers Morgan quite a few years ago.
The tyrants did it. Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand? That's why you're going to fail, and the establishment knows no matter how much propaganda, the Republic will rise again when you attempt to take our guns.
So, I have some strong views on Alex Jones. I think he's a conspiracy theorist, although he's been proven right on some things. I think he's kind of deranged. I think the things that he said in response to Sandy Hook were outrageous and he should be punished accordingly. But I always thought he believed in what he was saying. I mean, you can see him talking there. He seems to have complete conviction in his words, right? And yet, fast forward to today with ICE and Trump, who he backs without a single iota of skepticism or criticism, he's not saying that. He's saying, no, shoot them. Shoot the people with the guns. They've done nothing wrong. Alex Pretty had done nothing wrong. He'd simply said, hey, watch out. There was a woman who was falling over. He was just trying to protect a woman. Just watch out. He's pepper sprayed. He's taken down. He's mauled to the ground by multiple men. After being pepper sprayed directly in the face, you're meant to be sprayed in the chest. It's meant to go up. He's on the floor. They pacify him. They then remove his firearm and then shoot him multiple times while pacified on the floor. It's murder. Cold-blooded murder. And Alex Jones, for his entire public persona, his political career, his professional existence, throughout that, over many decades, he has said the number one thing he cares about is Americans' right to bear arms, to face down overwhelming tyrannical government. What the hell is that, Alex? If you can't possess a firearm when people are doing that, why have one at all? I believe in the Second Amendment to bear arms. You clearly don't if you think somebody should be murdered for possessing a firearm. And I really think this is a nadir, a watershed moment, actually, for Trump. I couldn't believe the words coming out of the mouths of the people we had at the top of this story. They're basically saying that when it comes to ICE, when it comes to Trump's agenda, there is no Second Amendment. It doesn't exist. And of course, in politics, you go from one policy to another policy to another policy. People are going to agree with one, disagree with another, but they'll agree here, disagree there. There'll be other policies where people who maybe agree with Trump on this will think, well, I might disagree with him in the future. Will that happen to me? Will I be shot for holding a firearm? And that's why the NRA made the intervention they did. This is a huge moment in American politics. It's happening with an allegedly pro-gun Republican president. Kieran, you saw those clips. I mean, it was amateur hour, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just to echo some of the things you were saying, Aaron, over the past 25 years, the average, in a single presidential term, the average number of Americans who will be killed by guns is equal to the entire number of American GIs who died in the Vietnam War. Around 58,000 people, fluctuates between 55 and 65,000 people are killed in an average presidential term by guns. That's an astonishing loss of human life. That's an astonishing loss of American life. And it was always justified on the basis that, first of all, the Second Amendment is mystical and sacred and people outside of the United States can't understand it. But also, there was a practical dimension, which is that it would prevent tyranny. And yet here you have marauding, masked government agents going around shooting people, armed, unarmed, it doesn't matter. And the people who are supposed to be defending this sacred covenant of the American right, dating back to 1776, are all in favour of it. It's that loss of life can't be justified by anything, in my view, but it would at least, I suppose, count for something if the professed ideology underpinning it were upheld now when it's tested. And yet we see, obviously, it's just a nasty, shallow political sham, Trumpism or not. If you support MAGA, you're fine. If you don't, you're not. I just quickly say, I think you're right, this is a nadir. I think Trump has bitten off more than he can chew. I think the United States is in its most volatile moment since the late 1960s, early 1970s. And I think that Trump's strategy here is completely ideologically incoherent because it's drawn into collision. It's drawn into conflict, as I say, two sacred covenants of the American right, anti-immigration on the one hand, and the right to bear arms on the other. So Trump taps into something which his base wants, which is, as they see it, illegal migrants deported. But then he gives ICE too much latitude to carry it out and too much free rein to carry it out. And they end up shooting white people, let's be honest. That's part of the equation here. It makes a difference. They've killed 2 white people in the past 2 weeks. And so I think that there's an ideological and strategic incoherence there because he has drawn a collision of two sacred covenants of the American right. And I think his base or his support base, the party, the Republicans, stand to lose from that. And that's reflected in his polling right now, not just overall, but with Republicans.
I would say one more thing on top of that, though, and it's not mentioned nearly enough. Barack Obama as president over 2 terms deports a ton of people. I'm not supportive of that. I'm just saying he was very, very good at killing people overseas with drone strikes and deporting people domestically. Two things which are, I think, unfairly put on the lap of the Republican Party. The Democrats do it just as well, if not better. That was done without these kinds of scenes, right? And I'm not saying that, Barack Obama was so much more impressive and technocratic in deporting people. I think the point for Trump is these scenes. Yeah. The point of ICE is this confrontation, is the TV, is the constant surge of images showing polarization, confrontation, distilled politics, and reminding people of his agenda, which is really popular with his supporters. Here's the problem, though. The idea that you would do that with a heavily armed domestic population simply can't work.
Right.
It cannot work unless you say, well, the one half of the population that strongly disagrees with me need to be disarmed, or their right to bear arms needs to be discounted. And I think that is something people really need to understand. These two people who've been killed in the United States, these scenes of violence, that woman who was assaulted by an ICE agent as well, just pushed away, this is the point. These images are the point. They are the political statement. They are. You could do 99% of this without any of those images, as Barack Obama showed, right? Trump is a TV guy. He wants images. He wants TV. Any final quick comments?
Just that I completely agree. The performativeness of it is a huge part of the importance of it as far as Trump is concerned. However, I suppose my central point is that I think it's a miscalculation. I think that the degree to which it has been rendered on this occasion and going back several weeks now is actually starting to produce diminishing returns for Trump and Trumpism. I think it's a strategic miscalculation. And I think that really the right to bear arms and the anti-immigration stuff coming into direct collision in this very violent fashion is the kind of most extreme expression of that.
Matt Goodwin has been announced as Reform's candidate in the forthcoming by-election in Manchester, Gorton and Denton. That name should sound familiar to some of you at least. You might remember this.
I want a national unifying politics which puts Britain first, not Pakistan, not Gaza, not any other foreign policy thing, Britain first.
Not Israel?
Well,
not Israel. The media's just been talking about Israel and the IDF for the last 4 or 5 days. That's all they talk about. You wouldn't think that high streets in this country are on the way down, or public services aren't doing well, or people are struggling with their bills. I hear so much about Israel.
Is that a fair point?
Well, my personal view is Israel is a very close ally. Well, until recently, it was a very close ally of the United Kingdom. We should look after our allies. Unfortunately,
no, we shouldn't.
Unfortunately,
we should look after Britain.
Unfortunately, Israel no longer feels that we are a reliable ally, thanks to the Labour government. I care. And
Why?
Lots of British Jews, a lot of British Jews in the country care about that.
The point of politicians in the UK should be to look out for the UK. That's it. That's something, by the way, that the right always used to say. And I used to look at them as somebody on the left going, you know what, I think they've got a point. And large parts of the right, Matthew, have just gone away from that because they just keep on talking about Israel and Tel Aviv and the IDF. They're making the IDF a protected characteristic. Need to go to the human rights, watchdog and maybe protect for, IDF lance corporals because they're being discriminated against by the UK, media. It's silly. You had it right. You had it right 5-10 years ago. Look after this country.
It's not silly to say Israel has a right to self-determination and to protect its own people.
Every country does.
That Britain's, particularly British Jews, also feel profoundly unsafe about the direction of travel in this country.
So hold on. You started this by saying British politicians shouldn't be talking about other countries. I say ignore Israel. And then you say, no, actually, no, they should be talking about Israel. You need to make your mind up.
I'm not saying they should be talking about Israel. I'm saying I have less of an issue with them talking about countries that are our allies than people who are actively trying to organise politics along sectarian lines, which is what this independent group is going to do. Let's be frank, it's going to be pro-Gaza, anti-Israel, anti-British state, anti-military, pro-Palestine action. It's going to be all the things that this country should not really have.
Do you know, in the last Parliament, do you know what percentage of Tory MPs were members of Conservative Friends of Israel?
How many?
70%. Be friends of your own constituencies.
In 2024, there was an event for Conservative Friends of Israel in, I think, Mayfair, Park Lane, something like that. I think it was Park Lane, actually. 650 attendees. Big event, right? 200 of them were MPs and lords. Not councillors and MPs and lords, people in public office. 200 were MPs and lords. Quite astonishing. I don't want the interests of other countries running riot in Britain, except this one country. Doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. Put this country first. That's what he said. Not Gaza, not Iraq, not Somalia. Britain first. Israel? Little raised eyebrow, Israel? That's all it needed, Israel. One word. The whole charade collapses. Anyhow, that was a relatively rare misstep by Matt Goodwin, who I know pretty well and often debate with on GB News. He's a polished media presenter, looks the part, he's a politics professor, and so has the credentials if those kinds of things matter to you. But he also says things which, frankly, the vast majority of Reform voters also think. What's more, he gets to refine that through constant feedback by being on TV and through his immensely successful Substack. It has over 90,000 subscribers, making it one of the most popular in the country. Here's Goodwin earlier on today announcing his candidacy.
I'm Matt Goodwin and I'm standing for Reform UK in the Gorton and Denton parliamentary by-election. This is a referendum on Keir Starmer. If you want Keir Starmer gone, if you want this Labour government gone, vote Reform UK, vote for me, Matt Goodwin. I don't know about you, I'm sick and tired of what has happened to our once great country. Mass uncontrolled immigration, broken borders, surging energy prices, the cost of living, the highest tax burden for decades. I've had enough of it, you've had enough of it. Let's work together here and make history by bringing down Keir Starmer and pushing this country in a different direction. Vote Matt Goodwin, vote Reform UK, let's make history together.
I thought that's great framing. He's saying, I am the anti-Starmer candidate. This by-election is a referendum between Reform and Labour, me and Keir Starmer. If you want Starmer gone, of course many people do, he's very unpopular as a Prime Minister, vote for me. What do you think?
Well, first of all, let's not descend into sycophancy, but that was one of your finest moments, Aaron. I think that you're right. I think that it's impressive presentation and he's mimicking Farage in the way he talks. I only just noticed it now watching that then. Goodwin, if he wins, I think it will be on the strength of Farage and Farageism and the way in which he has created, seemingly out of thin air, a populist right-wing party. I don't know Denton and Gorton in loads and loads of detail. I can't claim to. I don't personally think that Matt Goodwin, I can't understand how he could have broad appeal. He's a kind of reverse metamorphosis from a kind of centrist dad who likes data into a kind of professional culture wars provocateur. And he's clever in this. He comes from a kind of academic, urbane, urbanized, cosmopolitan elite, basically. Comes from the cosmopolitan elite. And he worked out that there's a very lucrative gap in the market, which was to go find appeal over the heads of his natural whatever audience initially, 10, 15 years ago, and go back to people from the front lines as part of the academic, urban elite and say, they're all full of shit. They're all full of shit. And they're after your hides. It was a very clever thing for him to have done. Whether it will translate into votes in Gorton, I don't know. But he's a very good fit for Reform as well. I mean, he's a very good fit for Reform because Reform is a project built on accelerating the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands while simultaneously blaming all of the bad stuff that happens as a result of that on the most vulnerable and weakest people in society.
I strangely have quite a lot of respect for people who I don't agree with, but who are on the right, and they'll say, you know what, we have loads of wrong uns in this country. Most of the bad things are done by people in this country, because of course most people in this country are from this country. But that's not a reason to let in more wrong uns. That's an argument here from some people, but that isn't an argument you typically hear from Nigel Farage or from Matt Goodwin. And it does fall into all the bad things in this country are the result of people who aren't white or not British. Now, I don't think Nigel Farage has said that. I don't think Matt Goodwin has said that. But there are people in their slipstream who clearly think that. I meet them. And it's outlandish, frankly. It's completely outlandish. Doesn't mean you should have this or that opinion on migration, but just objectively not true, right? I mean, there was recently this data about kids now going to school at 4, completely unprepared for going to primary school with regards to holding things, being able to go to the toilet, to eat. And you saw people on X saying, quite big accounts, this is because they're migrants. Yeah. They're brown and black. And actually, this is a big problem in parts of the country like the Northeast. It's less of a problem in London. So we know it's not that, But it's just become this idea that, if you're not white, you have an IQ of, 55 and you can't perform basic bodily functions. It's outlandish, actually, and it's definitely getting worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just that it's not that, it's that they advocate for the kind of economics and politics that has created shortage in schools and hospitals and so on. That's why they're such dangerous snake oil salesmen.
But you know what? Here's the thing with Goodwin, because I think Matt Goodwin would say, and he's unusual in this regard so far, he's not a Thatcherite, right? Maybe as a Reform MP, he'll adopt a bunch of policies because that's what the party's doing. But he said the country is more conservative on immigration and law and order than the political class. He said this for years, right?
Yeah.
And on the economy, it's more left-wing than the establishment. He's been saying that. And I do think if he wins, he'd be the first Reform ideologue.
Yeah.
He's not a local champion,
Yeah.
right? That's the whole thing. Local girl like Sarah Pochin. He's not somebody who's like a close, intimate friend of Farage. He's an ideologue. And I don't use that critically. We have ideologues on the left. He's thought a great deal about what he wants to do in politics, how he wants to win, his objectives. He has a worldview he's worked out. Of course he should. He's a professor of politics. And I think, in a way, if he wins, and this isn't something I wanted to talk about, but he more closely resembles a politician on the French radical right, or the Italian radical right, than somebody like Farage, because the default of lots of people in Reform right now, we see with Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, they're basically Thatcherites, right? And he is slightly different.
Yeah, no, I hear that. He does, in his book from 2023, The Values, I can't remember the exact name of it, you'll know, he talks about economics a little bit. But I think a couple of things I would say to that. First of all, he demotes it well below the importance of cultural elites, which is to completely prioritise the wrong things. And he talks in passing about economic elites and, but you're right, there is an element of that. What I would say, though, Aaron, I think your one-word riposte to him, Israel, also exposes how willing he is to flip-flop on things and how, just like the Trump lot in America with their guns, they are actually willing to slay their sacred cows if it means the advancement of their own careers or getting into power. I think the way his arc from 15 years ago as a centrist dad who likes data and is interested in the populist right to where he is now, plus the obvious idiocy of his position on Britain first until it's Israel, suggests to me that he's very willing to go along with any kind of Farageist neoliberalisation of whatever's remaining of the state in this country, as long as he is also a figurehead within Reform.
Now, we've said some kind things about Matt Goodwin, I suppose. He wears nice suits. He's credentialed, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have any vulnerabilities. Of course, any politician does, and his are very, very public. He's been in the public eye, after all, for more than a decade. In response to his candidacy being announced, Green Party leader Zach Polanski said this: "It tells you everything you need to know that Reform are parachuting in a Renton extremist. This isn't about representing the people of Gorton and Denton. It's about using this place as a platform for their careers. Manchester will show him the door." I think that's, again, a really, really powerful line. I have to say, since Brexit, politics in this country has never been more local. And in the background to the rising chances of the Greens, who, whatever you think of it, are the favourites now with some bookmakers, is the fact that a Green win in this by-election would be even worse for Starmer's party than a Reform victory. Here's Patrick Maguire in The Times a few days ago. That's a big one, isn't it? What is most striking is that they have conceded, albeit indirectly, that the same public hates the Prime Minister most of all. That much will be revealed when the Gorton by-election comes. Only Burnham could have won it for Labour. Again, this is the Times newspaper, it's not Novara Media. Starmer's critics now fear the party will not only lose it, but forfeit their claim to challenge Reform entirely, as was the case in Caerphilly last October, when Plaid Cymru galvanised progressive opposition to both the government and Farage. Of course, Caerphilly had been Labour. They collapsed in that part of the world, in South Wales. This time, it is Zach Polanski's insurgent Greens who stand to benefit. A Reform win would be terrible, said a sometime advisor to the Labour leadership, but a Green win would be existential. Already imperilled by one unwinnable test of his electoral appeal in May, Starmer has chosen to contrive another in February. So could it really be a race between Reform and the Greens? And if so, what holes are there in Goodwin's candidacy for the Greens, who won't be picking their own candidate until the 29th of January and won't be publicly declaring that person until February 1st? Well, firstly, Goodwin has links to the area, but he most certainly isn't a Mancunian. Secondly, he's a Southerner with credentials and appears regularly in the media, rallying against the credential class and the liberal media establishment. As you've said, Kieran, for some people that might seem somewhat hypocritical. I think the main vulnerability for Goodwin is going to be the perception of being parachuted in. Mm-hmm. This just doesn't work anymore. Labour tried it. People hate it.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. What I was saying earlier on about, I find it difficult to understand how Goodwin could just be grafted into a place like that and seemingly blend in and seem of the place. And I think that you're right. I mean, Labour parachuted again and again and again, and it seldom works out. People feel insulted. Local people feel insulted by it. It will be very, very interesting. It's a test case. It will be extremely interesting to see how it goes down. I think and I hope the Greens will pick a very good candidate, and that it will be, and this is probably something that alienates people, a polarised battle. I'd like to see a highly polarised fight in this by-election between two groups that represent very, very different things or very, very different conceptions of the future in British politics. And it will be a test case, not just for parachuting by-election, but for the coming election.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really fascinating. By-elections are always very, very hard, and you need a strong logistical operation to win. I think it's going to be so tough for the Greens because of that, but I suspect they'll do very, very well. Last week, the US operations of the massive social video platform TikTok came into the partial ownership of one Larry Ellison and his company, Oracle. And Ellison, a tech billionaire and one of the world's wealthiest people, is also a close ally of, you guessed it, US President Donald Trump. So it's perhaps no surprise that users of the app have complained that content critical of the US government and published by users in the United States is being interfered with or even suppressed. This is a clip of US TV host Andy Cohen giving a short monologue on his comedy show addressing the murder of Alex Pretty on the streets of Minneapolis by federal border agents. And it's very critical of the administration, with Cohen essentially calling them liars. As you can see, a lot, possibly hundreds of users are reporting that the video won't load or freezes or is glitching. Here's another video released overnight from a smaller account called The Necessary Conversation. It publishes conversations between a liberal son and his MAGA-supporting parents. In this video, they're discussing the slaying of Pretty. Again, it's critical of the American government. And again, hundreds of users are reporting glitches and freezing. But not all videos are suffering the same issues. This is another clip from the very same Andy Cohen show, posted by the same account just 2 hours after the first one, but this time addressing entertainment topics, no politics, and therefore no issues reported by users. And this clip from the same show was posted just a little before the Trump critical one. Again, it's focused just on entertainment, and there are no complaints from users. Funny that. The issues with Trump critical videos have been reported far and wide. Forbes magazine has reported on a deluge of Democrat politicians, influencers, and celebrities raising concerns about censorship, especially when the content involves discussion of the ICE execution of Alex Pretty on Saturday. Those speaking out include US law professor Steve Vladek, who posted this to his 250,000 Blue Sky followers on Monday. This morning, I recorded a video on TikTok about why DHS's arguments for the power to enter homes without judicial warrants in immigration cases are bunk. 9 hours later, TikTok still says my video is, quote, under review and can't be shared. Well, here's a link. Megan Stalter, an actress from the hit series Hacks, posted this to Instagram on Monday. Hi, so today I'll be downloading my videos and deleting my TikTok page. TikTok is under new ownership and we're being completely censored and monitored. I'm unable to upload anything about ICE even after I tried to trick the page by making it look like a comedy video. Let's delete the app. Love you. The governor of California and frequent Trump critic Gavin Newsom has also got involved with his office posting this online on Tuesday. New, following TikTok's sale to a Trump-aligned business group, our office has received reports and independently confirmed instances of suppressed content critical of President Trump. California Governor Gavin Newsom is launching a review of this conduct and is calling on the California Department of Justice to determine whether it violates California law. I suspect it does. For its part, the consortium that now owns TikTok's US operations tried to explain the issues with this statement. We're continuing to resolve major infrastructure issues triggered by a power outage at one of our US data center partner sites. While the network has been recovered, the outage caused a cascading systems failure that we've been working to resolve together with our data center partner. What this means for your TikTok experience, you may notice multiple bugs, slower loading times, or timed out requests, including when posting new content. Creators may temporarily see 0 views or likes on videos, and your earnings may look like they're missing. This is a display error caused by server timeouts. Your actual data and engagement are safe. Thank you for your patience and understanding as we work to bring TikTok back to full capacity as soon as we can. The right to operate TikTok in the US was sold to Oracle, along with 2 other companies, by Chinese TikTok owner ByteDance after months, even years, of political pressure. Donald Trump described the deal as meaning, quote, TikTok will now be owned by a group of American patriots and investors, the biggest in the world. US officials became anxious about the giant app in 2020, which is when Trump first tried to ban it in the United States. Concerns raised by US lawmakers included claims that Chinese ownership of such an influential and popular app could lead to undue foreign influence on American citizens, the theft of their data, and the platform even being used to surveil its users, heaven forbid. But of course, the claims of censorship of the app under US control, especially by close Trump allies, may suggest, ironically enough, that users were better off in Chinese hands, and that the Chinese Communist Party was a better guarantor of free speech, in the United States at least, than the Trump White House. Something to think about. Kieran, TikTok, what's going on? That looks like a reasonable excuse, but then I've seen some pretty outrageous stuff there.
No, I think it's quite clear what's going on. And I think, Aaron, underpinning all of this is Silicon Valley created a paradox for capitalism. It created a paradox for capitalism because the technologies that it produced genuinely contained the potential to disrupt existing order. It genuinely contained the potential for counter-hegemonic or counter-mainstream narratives and the dissemination of those narratives. But of course, as soon as that was understood and the monsoon of dollars kind of turned into pallid faces in the corridors of power, big capital and their politician outriders, or its politician outriders, did as much as they could to recuperate those technologies and ensure that they became monopolistic technologies that reflected kind of imperialist narratives, mainstream narratives, and so on. And I think we're living for a period in which that battle has largely been won with the biggest big tech companies, the biggest big tech technologies. We're living in a period in which big tech, most of that recuperation has been done, but there is still kind of fighting in the margins. I mean, what's your view?
It's over. You know, I think it's a matter of time before we see the end of the American internet. And I say that as somebody who, we started an organization which depends on not just Google and Meta products, Instagram and YouTube, but even internally, Notion, Slack. We are all dependent, as we'll see in a moment, we are all dependent, particularly in Europe, on these really important American products. And I think the challenge now is to move beyond them. And I think that's easy in some places, yeah. You can have a non-US Slack, really easy, a non-US Notion, email, might not have exactly the same functionality, but then stuff like Instagram, Google, it's going to be really challenging. I think it's a matter of when, not if. Mm-hmm. I do think this is going to be a major problem, right? We talk about multipolarity, the end of the American world order. This is a part of it. We'll see. I hope not, of course. I love all of you. We'll be on YouTube as long as they'll have us. Ellison's control of TikTok has also spawned a new competitor, built by Palestinian-Australian developer Issam Hijazi. Launched in 2025, Upscrolled has soared to top of the UK Apple Store's downloads for for social apps, fueled by rumours of censorship on TikTok. It also stands at 3rd in the US for social apps, but 4th for all categories of apps, and it's 12th across all apps in Australia. Pretty impressive. Speaking on a panel last year, Upscroll developer Issam Hijazi explained why he'd focused on building his own app.
Larry Ellison, the owner of Oracle, is the biggest contributor to the Friends for Idea charity, right?
Yeah, that's right.
His last contribution was about 16 million, and that still you something. If that person, who's friend with Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel in general, is gonna own 80% of TikTok, moving on, and if Netanyahu himself saying that the importance of utilizing TikTok and X to spread their narrative, that tells you a lot of things. They understand the danger that TikTok has created, obviously, and social media in general, of reaching out to every person across the globe or showing the real face of Israel to the world. And now they want to control that, just like they controlled CNN, just like they control Fox News and all the other media outlets. They understand now this is the new tool to control the brains of the young generation everywhere. And they want to ensure that they send them messages that they want to brainwash the next generation. It's going to get even worse. I think at some point we will not be able to speak out about anything that's pro-Palestinian or anything that goes against their propaganda.
That's pretty extraordinary for a guy who's created a very, very, very good app. Novara Media's on there, just about. I think we joined last night. We saw it was doing so well in the UK. We thought, well, let's give it a try. I'm on there. I never did TikTok. I'm too old. I do lots of X, I do Instagram. But he's making a very, very important point, which is you cannot rely on these platforms. That's obviously a very good left-wing argument for the existence of Upscrolled, one that free speech-loving liberals should embrace too, but it's also a good business case. If TikTok wants to suppress pro-Palestinian content, then suddenly a market, and clearly a very fast-growing one, emerges for a site that won't. And there's good reason to think that TikTok has suppressed pro-Palestinian content. As of last week, Adam Presser is CEO of TikTok's US operations. Before that, he was TikTok's head of operations. But a video of Presser speaking at an event in Jerusalem in May 2025 has recently resurfaced and has been viewed millions of times.
We made a change to designate the use of the term Zionist as a proxy for a protected attribute as hate speech. So if somebody were to use Zionist, of course you can use it in the sense of you're a proud Zionist. But if you're using it in the context of degrading somebody, calling somebody a Zionist as a dirty name, then that gets designated as hate speech to be moderated against. Over the course of 2024, we tripled the amount of accounts that we were banning for hateful activity. We also have, I think, over 24 Jewish organizations that are constantly feeding us intelligence and information when they spot violative trends. There is no finish line. There's no finish line to moderating hate speech, identifying hateful trends, trying to keep the platform safe. There's no such thing as an end game.
The first bit, that's crazy. I'm a Zionist. You're a Zionist? No problem. Oh, you're a Zionist? How dare you? Censor this person. Get them off the platform. So basically, let me get this right. Every other country in the world, if you say you're a radical ultra-nationalist, that's a problem, unless it's Israel, and then it's fine. And actually, we're going to protect you, poor little you. In your poor little country, you've got nuclear weapons and a very powerful secret services, and you've got, the patronage of the world's most powerful country. Poor you. TikTok will look after you. Kieran, what do you think?
Last time I was in Palestine, I said to family and friends and the people in the community, why is it that Israel has become so unpopular over the past 20 years, 25 years? What's happened? It's such an extraordinary shift where Israel can go from being this place that unites liberals and conservatives the world over. And suddenly now it is so deeply, profoundly unpopular. What's happened? And they all answered unequivocally. They said social media. The ability of Palestinians to report and document in real time their own suffering and injustice without the influence or the mediation of the mainstream media, with all of its inbuilt biases, with all of the pressure from pro-Israel interest groups and big business interest groups and so on. The ability of Palestinians to do that has completely flipped the script. That's what it was. And so I think highlighting that, I largely agree with them. I think highlighting that underscores why this particular area, Palestine, Israel, is such a critical terrain for these guys to fight on. It's borne very tangible fruit and it's very clear material shifts. And for that reason, they absolutely have to go to war with everybody that has shifted, the world that is pro-Palestine.
They have to go to war with free speech. Larry Ellison bought TikTok. He, by the way, for peanuts, given its actual value, he bought CBS. These people funded the Free Press, this fake media organization. I call it fake. That's unfair, right? Let me put my Michael Walker hat on. It's a media organization with certain political commitments, but it's certainly not worth $150 million US, right? Novara has a bigger social footprint than they do. I wish we were worth 150. We wouldn't sell, but it'd be cool, right? It'd be cool for our supporters to be helping that be possible. We're not worth that. They're not worth that. And that was started and then purchased, and then Barry Weiss, who started the Free Press, is then the head of, I think, news at CBS. All because Larry Ellison is in real time saying we need to manufacture consent. This is not some macro analysis by some sort of intellectual in a university. One of the world's richest people is, we need to manufacture consent. What can we do? What levers can we pull? Fund this new thing, buy that, censor these people. What can we do? And it's extraordinary seeing it happen out in the open. Of course, elites have always worked like that, but this is something different. I want to quickly go to a comment because I think it's very important. Micah's Music. Does Aaron or anyone else at Novara get paid by X for their posts? So I've got a verified account so I can DM people to get them on downstream without them following me necessarily. That's why I have a verified account. I am not monetized, which you'll know if you go through my tweets. You won't see any ads. I'm not monetized because I don't want to give my ID to Elon Musk. I'm probably missing out on a couple of grand a year, I'm sure. It doesn't really bother me. So no, I'm not getting a penny from X. Nor is Novara, as I understand it. But I'm certainly not. And if you want receipts, I can show you screen grabs of not being monetized. If you do want to support our work here at Novara Media, though, of course, go to novaramedia.com/support. We built, by the way, our own payment system. It's all in-house. We built that. So we're already trying to build in some resilience to this kind of response, right? We're going to have to build a lot more of that in the years ahead because there are people, not just Larry Ellison, who want to take back control of the narrative, whether it's Gaza, whether it's inequality, whether it's working people getting a better deal. They want to take back control, which is why you've got to support people like Novara Media, or even if you don't like us, somebody else who's doing a similar job, because without these grassroots, independent media outlets and voices, people like Larry Ellison are going to win, and that ain't good. Clearly, because technology is powerful, it's always going to be political. So perhaps the question isn't how do you get politics out of technology, but how do states control the politics around it? That's something France seems to be onto, having announced that by 2027, they'll be ditching US technologies like Microsoft Teams and Zoom in government departments because of security concerns. Instead, the French government says they'll be investing in sovereign platforms, some of which already exist. So French developed and French made with the aim of serving national security while keeping the economic benefits of its population using the technology inside the country. I think that's sensible. Britain should be doing something similar, presumably.
It absolutely should, but it took this path of absolute folly about 50, 60 years ago, which was to deindustrialize and about 40 years ago to shift a lot of its resources into financialization and the financial services sector. And if you even the most conservative French president over the past 50, 60 years, Fifth Republic and beyond, none of them have ever considered themselves vassals of the United States or wanted to align themselves so close with the United States that it compromises national industry and so on. And I think that has made an enormous difference to the developmental path that France has taken. And that's expressing itself now when you see the United States kind of destroying the post-World War II order and the economic alliances related to or attendant to it. And it is a stark contrast to Britain. You're absolutely right. For all sorts of complex reasons which are beyond the remit of our conversation now. But I think that's essentially the the prime cause.
I mean, the dependence on US technology, it's something we talked about last week. Trident's independent. Bro, those missiles have kill switches, right? Those F-35s, if you don't think they've got kill switches in the US, I don't think you were born yesterday, but you might as well have been. I quite like the idea of being able to walk to work or my kids being able to walk to school. I like the idea of a local post office, pub and cafe where you can work sometimes and know the names of the staff. I think walking is good for you, not only because of the exercise, but also because by looking around and taking in the changing of the seasons and your surroundings, you feel more tied to a place, more committed to it. For virtually all my life, such claims, rhetorically at least, were expressed by conservatives. Community cohesion, localism, politics being rooted in a sense of place. But increasingly, certainly in the last few years, it seems that if you favour such things, then you'll be labelled as dangerous, degenerate and extremist. That certainly seems true for the Daily Telegraph, who've published an extraordinary article with this headline. Labour opens door to Stalinist 15-minute cities across Britain. Because apparently sending hundreds of thousands of people to gulags in Siberia and having a local pub and post office you can walk to are basically the same thing. Cycling to your cutesy local cafe on a Bastani bike through wildflowers and frolicking children, well, that's essentially the same as living in a police state with collectivised farms. Now, this story of 15-minute cities, nice, convenient, livable cities, has long been an obsession for parts of the right-wing media. You've heard it being a World Economic Forum conspiracy for years, so why are we hearing about it all over again? Well, because Oxford City Council, ground zero for this stuff in the UK, are trying to discourage unnecessary trips by car through the middle of the historic city. And most recently, Labour ministers have said they will allow councils such as Oxford to use driver licence databases to impose fines on drivers who fall foul of traffic filters. Under Oxford's particular scheme, drivers would need a residence permit that allows 100 days of free travel per year through 6 traffic filters during operating hours, kind of like a congestion zone. And meanwhile, a separate permit would allow 25 days of free travel per year through 6 congestion charge locations during charging hours, and after this, drivers would face fines if they travel without the relevant permission. Broadly speaking, we've had this stuff in the capital city for over 2 decades. Responding to the proposals, Greg Smith, the shadow transport minister, in other words, a Tory, said this. This is the blueprint for a national rollout. Labour has given the green light for draconian councils like Oxfordshire to police how people live, move and drive, using cameras and fines backed by DVLA data. Don't we already do that for speeding? I think we do. Duncan White, director of the Alliance of British Drivers, which I'd never previously heard of, the Alliance, millions of drivers, how many members I wonder, probably in the dozens, said that 15-minute cities were an abomination, adding it was perverse and a Stalinist approach to social control. He also claimed it is an encroachment on civil liberties and it is a page out of the East Germany playbook. A congestion zone is like living with the Stasi or having a family member disappear. A reminder, this is all being introduced by a council that people voted for. They voted for the councillors then do something. If it doesn't work, or you don't like it, you can vote for someone else. That's the point. A council doing something with a democratic mandate, even if you're not a fan, is nothing like East Germany. White also said this. With the 15-minute city, you'll have to, in effect, apply for an internal passport to go and visit your granny. These people are absolutely mad. From a civil liberties perspective, it is nonsensical. From an operational point of view, it is bizarre. This is an argument against road tax. I just want to see my granny and you're taxing me. It's a tax on seeing my grandmother. I mean, technically, yeah, of course, you're right. I just want to go to the shops and get food for my kids. You're taxing me just for moving in a car. Well, yeah, how are we going to pay for the roads? How do you expect to have a clean Liverpool city centre if it's a free-for-all? We have to regulate it. You know, the exact same people, almost all of them on the right, talk about state failure. Nothing works. But they don't believe in the state. You've got to believe in the state for the state to do stuff. But they hate the state. They hate the state because they're libertarians. And guess what? A state overseen by libertarians, which basically we've had in many parts of this country, for a really long time, means the state doesn't work. I walked past a vape shop the other day. Disposable vapes were criminalized a year ago in June 2025. You can't buy disposable vapes anymore. On the front of the shop, they were advertising disposable vapes. How can you do that? Because we don't have trading standards anymore. The Tories basically defunded it. Because they don't believe in the state. But then they say, oh my God, why can't we enforce any laws? Well, because you've got rid of the people that enforce the laws. Jack Cousins, head of the roads policy at the AA, had a slightly more sensible response. He said this: what local authorities sometimes struggle to remember is that the car remains and continues to remain the main method which people use to travel around our country. Cars coming into the town centres generate a huge amount of parking revenue for local authorities, and the local high street is dependent on strong, consistent footfall, and cars are probably the easiest way for people to get in and out of town centres. We don't want barriers that harm the national economy and the local economy. I agree. It's a balancing act. You've got different interests. We need more walkable cities with a better quality of life. We want kids to be able to walk to schools. But we don't want to make life impossible for some people. We don't want certain businesses to just basically go to rack and ruin. People in this country started the Industrial Revolution. They discovered penicillin and gravity. I'm pretty sure they can manage traffic management. Right? Pretty sure. Right? Somebody in this country worked out that we have something called evolutionary adaptation. Pretty sure we can work out how to get a few cars out of the centre of Oxford. No need for the conspiracy theories. I'm sick of it. Kieran.
Yeah, I'm also very sick of these bizarre conspiracy theories. I think this is such an interesting question, and I'm really glad that we're covering it. Because it speaks to, probably this is going to sound too story, but let me try and explain what I mean. It speaks to a split within conservatism in this country that's never been resolved between the kind of high Tory or paleo-conservative, as they used to be called, people who look out for the kind of the agricultural interest, the community interest, people who are never, or at least profess to have never been totally comfortable with modernity, the Industrial Revolution, modern world, right? Traditional conservatism, really traditional conservatism. On the one hand, and on the other hand, a kind of, basically what the Conservative Party has been for 150 years, which is a kind of free market, post-industrial, free market, if you want to say libertarian-like ideology. And every time those two versions of conservatism have clashed over the past 200, 300 years, the latter have won. The free market conservatism and that vision of kind of postmodern or post-industrial conservatism has won. And I suppose, and this is really important, Aaron, what they have in common is that they dislike the state, generally. Both those groups do have in common that they dislike the state. And that's really important here because the state has become a kind of bugbear in this whole discussion about 15-minute cities. And the irony is that the state is very often the only entity that can protect the kind of concerns of the high Tories and the paleo-conservative, the community, the natural world, the traditions. The state is often the only entity that's able to protect those things from the free market and from the rampages of the free market and so on. So there's an interesting irony there. Final observation, I don't drive, but I do know from people that do, some of them, that they symbolize their car, they synonymize their car with freedom, with individualism and independence and freedom. So I can see how it becomes difficult in that context. The car stops just being a car, basically.
There's a comment here, a super chat, saying disposable vapes are legal to buy as long as they have a charging port. There are vending machines across the UK selling them. But they're not, it's a loophole, but the point is they're not meant to be disposable. It's a manufacturing loophole, yes. This was a big poster saying, buy disposable vapes here. The point is, and you're entirely right, they're not meant to be disposable. That's the whole point of having the port there. And believe it or not, this was opposite at school. Buy disposable vapes here. And the whole argument against these products, which has this loophole, you're absolutely right, was that they were appealing to young kids with really colourful advertising and certain kinds of flavours and whatnot. It's extraordinary. Just advertising it there. So it's concerning. And it gets really to the point of, the state. Another one is tobacco. Counterfeit tobacco, smuggled tobacco, which people aren't paying tax on. And they would say, well, a right winger would say, well, tax is so high, you've incentivized smuggling. We got rid of trading standards. My dad, he smokes roll-ups sometimes. He's like, yeah, I pay £4 for tobacco, of course. Who'd be stupid enough to pay the tax on it, right? And that is the country we're in now, and that wasn't the case in this country 15, 20 years ago because we had a state apparatus that could deal with it. There is so much criminal activity in this country now from counterfeit goods, smuggling, money laundering, so much. What do you think Bitcoin is? I know lots of you are going to have Bitcoin. It's not used for money laundering. Most of it is. What do you think NFTs were? Oh, this stupid guy just spent $3.5 million on an NFT over tweet. What do you think it was? It's cleaning money. Anyway, we'll talk about that more at another date. Been a great show. And your point about this battle for the soul of conservatism. They are liberals. They're hyper liberals. If you don't believe in place, if you don't believe in identity and bonds between human beings and tradition, if you don't believe in those things, and you just think people should just be in their car all the time and just buying shit, you're a liberal. You're a hyper liberal. Peter Hitchens would agree with us, right?
Yeah, and important to say, people will think of Thatcher straight away, right? When you say that, and that's totally legitimate because she's the most recent, profound expression of it. But actually, if you go back to the middle of the 19th century, you will find version 1 of conservatism losing to version 2 of conservatism with the Corn Laws, the repeal of the Corn Laws. Now, we're not going to go into that now, but it's been a dominant tendency in conservatism in this country for 2 centuries.
A comment here as well. All the expensive art scene is about money laundering, not just NFTs. Totally. Everywhere I look now, money laundering. Everywhere. I'm talking to a guest about that on Downstream this week. Great book on it. Very, very interesting. This has been a great show. We went a little bit over, only 5 minutes. Kieran, been wonderful to have you on.
I think we've been incredibly disciplined time-wise for us.
So unusual.
Isn't it?
And you even mentioned the Corn Laws. I thought this is Kieran. We've got Kieran in the house.
Even Corn Laws at one end, Eric Cantona and Zinedine Zidane at the other.
There you go. Nice book ending. Thanks to the rest of you, of course, for tuning in. Come back tomorrow for another live stream at 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.